Jamaica. Welcome to Centrally Speaking, the show where we break down economic and financial matters shaping everyday lives across our island.
Definitely. Whether you're running a business or managing your household budget, this program, is it a program? Is essentially speaking with Anna Sheena? It's designed with you in mind.
The road to economic recovery post Hurricane Melissa is the focus of today's program. Our guest will be Deputy Governor with responsibility for Financial Institutions Supervisory Division, Dr. Jide Lewis.
Yes, Dr. Lewis will be giving us a progress report on the state of the financial services sector. Some of those things that affect our daily lives and what BOJ has been doing to mitigate the effects caused by Hurricane Melissa.
But before he joins us, let's head to the streets.
Let me see what I'm going.
What do you think can be done about the banking services in Jamaica?
I think they can improve their working hours, like open the bank a little bit longer, especially on weekends, and also they can get some more tellers.
Well, I think that the online services could be a bit more streamlined, also less downtime, especially during the busy times like end of month when people are trying to make crucial payments.
They need to service their machine more. When I can't but certain bank machine never work.
Better customer service, longer hours, and them can open weekend too.
At banks we have the long lines, so what I think they can do is to implement a system where there is a queue system that you can, log into online and get a number and put in what you are going to do instead of standing outside and waiting in the long lines.
I think we need more banking hours, like for instance, you have a bank open like 9:45 and by 2:30 it closes. I think we need extra hours. And the ATM, I think they need to put more cash in the ATM because like Saturday I went to like 3 different ATMs and there were no cash there.
When we do road, the people talk the good things them. The good vibes and the good things them. We love to hear it. Thanks for those answers, guys.
And we leave the streets to check in with our guest, Deputy Governor with responsibility for Financial Institutions Supervisory Division, Dr. Jide Lewis. Jide, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Sheena. Thanks for having me, Anna.
It's been a while.
It has been a while.
So, Dr. Lewis, let's jump right into it. How has the banking system fared since the passage of Hurricane Melissa? I know that several of its services have been impacted, especially in Western Jamaica.
Anna, the hurricane, a Category 5, had a significant impact on the infrastructure of the banking system. And there's good news, though. The banking system proved itself to be resilient. Banks remain adequately capitalized. They have the cash, they're liquid, and they are building back their infrastructure with time. So we are working with them to ensure that they get back to full capacity in the shortest time possible.
All right. So, Jide, you spoke to the devastation which was occasioned by Melissa, and I want to zero in on its impact on the ABM infrastructure. And I want to know what is happening in relation to the recovery efforts in that regard.
I would say that the day after the hurricane, 250 ABMs out of the 888 went completely dark. They were damaged. Many of them didn't have access to electricity or telecommunications. And the banks have been working steadily as long as those areas or parishes have had the infrastructure in place to put back their ABMs into operation. So currently, as at January, there are about 812 ABMs out of the 888, which are now available to Jamaicans to be accessed. Of course, we're not back to where we were before the hurricane, where we had 855 ABMs available for Jamaicans to use. But we are getting back there, and the banks are working assiduously, and the central bank is trying to support as best as possible.
All right, so speaking about support, Dr. Lewis, I'm certain that with the displacement of 250 ABMs, that has impacted quite a couple of 100,000 users, especially in the affected parishes. Now, the division that you lead is directly responsible for supervising banks. So, and you also take customer complaints through a department, through your division. So how is BOJ, through your division, helping customers to settle the complaints and the many issues that they might have? based on the displacement because of the unavailability of ABMs and thereby cash.
We have been working with the commercial banks from as far back as maybe 2 weeks after the hurricane to work with them to find what are innovative ways they can provide cash services. Some of them have open branches using trailer trucks, for example. Some of them have collaborated with other institutions as a ways to have a storefront, so to speak, to offer financial services to the public. So our job has been to ensure that as these applications come to us, we process them as quickly as possible so that they can deploy. Our job is to make sure that what they're deploying is robust. It protects members of the public and it allows them to dispense with their obligations under their license, which is to accept deposits and to issue loans to members of the public. And so we've been working with them in terms of that. That's one. Two, we've tried to make sure that members of the public are aware of where services are available. So on a weekly basis, we have been publishing where branches are available island-wide and which ones are open, their opening hours, as well as which ABMs are available by parish, so that Jamaicans can know where they can access, particularly those who are in the western parishes of Jamaica. And thirdly, we have been working with them in terms of trying to ensure that as quickly as they can restore normalcy to the provision of their services. So those are the three things that we've been working with them on, and we are seeing that improvement. I just want to also point out a lot of persons, when they see me standing up by an ABM and waiting for service, they ask me, well, the hurricane didn't impact Kingston. Why is it that I'm having trouble accessing my funds? And I always want to point out that even though Kingston wasn't hit, persons need to remember that the same infrastructure that was essentially disabled as a result of the hurricane, 250 ABMs going down, meant that Jamaicans went to other places to try and meet their cash demand and, of course, their deposit needs. And so there was increased strain on the facilities that were remaining after the hurricane. And so what that meant is fewer machines, even increased demand for cash as people are trying to rebuild and support our relatives in the western part of Jamaica. So we're all in this together, whether we were hit by Hurricane Melissa directly or we were spared. We are all feeling the impacts as a result of that.
Specific to inherent risks as it relates to our heavy reliance on cash. What are we doing? What can the financial system do in terms of pivoting to look at more diversified payment options?
I'm glad you've asked that question, Sheena. Jamaica has to increase the amount of options available to ordinary Jamaicans to access cash and to access the banking system. And here at the Bank of Jamaica, as the governor has said on many occasions, we are trying to help the banking sector pivot to using the central bank digital currency.
That's Jamdex, right?
That's Jamdex. And what that will enable is an alternate means of payments. But for that to be successful, there are four things that need to be in place. One, we need to ensure that ordinary Jamaicans have digital wallets available to them. And commercial banks have to play a leading role in ensuring that that is happening and they have a framework to allow for that. Secondly, merchants have to have the instruments, whether it's a point of sale instrument or some other device that allows them to accept the central bank digital currency. Thirdly, Jamaicans have to be sensitized to understand how to use a digital currency wisely. In the same way that you learn how to use cash and you buy a wallet and you know how to put it away and you know not to make your cash stick out of your pocket. In the digital world, there are different approaches that you have to take as an ordinary citizen to protect yourself. And fourthly, we have to make it easier for ordinary Jamaicans to open bank accounts. Right? And that's one of the reasons why the central bank is moving in the direction of facilitating electronic Know Your Customer services. This will allow ordinary Jamaicans to basically stay at their homes or wherever they are and be able to reliably and safely and securely open a bank account using the information that they have given consent to use. And so those are the 4 things that would need to happen so that that digital ecosystem can provide a reliable alternative to cash. Because we use a lot of cash in Jamaica, you know, right? We use a lot of cash. And if you look at it, they're really micropayments, right? The average ABM withdrawal is 15,000 Jamaican dollars on average, right? The average remittance is 250 US dollars. So Jamaica has a preponderance of micropayments, and we need an ecosystem that allows for those micropayments to occur or take place without using cash.
So, Jide, you pointed to education and awareness as your 3rd point, and I want to go back there.
Sure.
There is a general apprehension amongst Jamaicans in relation to digital currency. And, you know, we want to understand what is driving this.
I think it's, you know, really what you're accustomed to. And I'm going to use the example of telephones in Jamaica.
Yeah.
You know, Anna is too young to remember
Yeah,
when,
she is
you
definitely
know, we
too
had
young.
Telephone Company of
Me
Jamaica.
young too.
And
Me
of course,
young.
of course. And, you know, we had landlines and we had, you know, these call stations on the road, right?
Phone booth.
Phone booths,
No, my
phone
sister, me no
booths,
young.
phone booths. And for years, that's all Jamaicans knew, right? You would, if you need to make a call, you make it before you leave the house. And if somebody's going to call you, they call you when you get back home. And maybe on the off chance and there's an emergency, use a phone booth. Now, your children, my children may not even know what a phone booth is, right? Because we had this technological innovation called the mobile phone. And now everybody uses it and they can make calls wherever they are. They don't have to wait until they go home or wait until they are at a phone booth to make a call. Central bank digital currency is going to have to go through the same journey. We're going to have to educate persons to say, hey, you know, it's not a phone booth, but guess what? You can still make your phone calls. It's still reliable. In the case of a central bank digital currency, you can still make your payments. You can still receive payments, and it's safe and it's reliable. But the ecosystem has to be there first before we go out into campaigning and trying to educate the public. But once that transformation takes place and persons start to realize, hey, this works, because it worked at, you know, the grocery store, it worked when a pharmacy, it worked at the haberdashery, suddenly the word will spread, and over time, and we'll continue to educate. So we're committed to educating the public around how convenient central bank digital currency is once the ecosystem is in place.
So the ecosystem will take a little while to mature, the ecosystem that will support digital currency. So, but in the meantime, we still have that heavy reliance on cash. And because most cash is accessed through ABMs and ATMs, there's still a level of service that is expected of banks. So the question is, considering the challenges, yes, posed by Melissa and the recovery efforts and so on, what is BOJ doing, or how has it been helping banks to maintain an acceptable service level standard, knowing that they have a challenge with disruption in some parts of the island?
We weren't really demanding of the financial institutions that they hit the service level standards of 90% uptime and 95% of ABMs available, or, you know, maybe being repaired or being up to be available to the public after 3 hours in rural areas or 1 hour in Kingston and metropolitan areas. We then focused instead on try to make sure that minimum access to cash is made available. And our role was to try to communicate to the public where that was available. Now we're several months after the hurricane. And so we're now pivoting now to go back to the banks to say, okay, now that you have stabilized, 90% of your ABMs are operational. Generally speaking, you're still having some trouble in some rural areas, and we understand that. Let us now get back to the script where we're focusing on the service level standards. But you can appreciate that our focus has to first be on making sure that banks are operating in a safe and sound manner, firstly. Secondly, that the parishes that are hardest hit were able to get minimum services up and running. And we have seen that, and of course, we continue to monitor that. Now that things have stabilized, we're now going to turn our attention back to the service level standard. So we ask members of the public to continue to be patient, even as the commercial banks are making efforts to get back to where they were pre-Melissa, which, by the way, I'll remind you that pre-Melissa, they were, in terms of ABMs that were up and running, 93% across the island, right? In terms of uptime, it was about 91% of the time that the ABM is operational available to members of the public. And in terms of ABMs being repaired after they've gone down, we were seeing that fall from about 7 hours to about 3.5 hours across the island. So we were seeing that progress. Now is not the time for us in the middle of a recovery effort to beat them over the head to say, guess what? You've messed up, because not all of it is really on their shoulders. They have to wait for the rest of the framework to catch up.
Jide, always insightful. We're going to pause this conversation a little bit.
Sure.
More from Dr. Lewis after these messages.
Welcome back to Centrally Speaking. We're having a very interesting discussion with Dr. Jide Lewis. He's Deputy Governor at Bank of Jamaica, responsible for the Financial Institutions Supervisory Division. So, Dr. Lewis pretends to be a Mass Noel from Guysill. And I see you up on the road, and I say,
You're a good-looking Mass Noel, by the way.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir. And I see you on the road, and I ask you, Mr. Jide, what we can do if I have a problem with the bank? I mean, my large complaint and then take long for you answer me. What me can do? What you can do for me, Mr. Jide? How would you respond to Mass Noel?
Part of what I try to remind members of the public is that there is a framework for complaints handling. Each commercial bank is required to have a complaints handling mechanism with a designated person who handles your complaints when they're sent in. Each commercial bank is required to have an email address where that complaint is sent in. And my advice to persons is always, when you send in your complaint via email to that bank, be as clear as possible about what the issue was, when it took place. If you have photographs that you can attach to the email, that is helpful, because all of these things help to evidence what you are saying in your complaint. Now, if after 45 days, you have not heard from your commercial bank, at that point, you need to escalate that complaint to the central bank. And we have an email address, customer.complaints@boj.org.jm, that you can write to us. We will be rolling out a portal where you can go on the Bank of Jamaica website and you can enter your complaint on that website. It will log all your issues, and it will allow us to follow up with the commercial bank on the issue. So you don't have to do emails anymore. You just go on the portal. It's pretty straightforward, fill in your information. But of course, you have to do that after you have engaged the commercial bank in terms of the specific issue.
And you don't get a response.
And you don't get a response, right. Then turn to the portal, fill in the information, and then we'll begin to track that issue for you and with you through to completion.
All right, so Jide, I want to take us back a little bit. The earlier part of the conversation, it was pretty jarring. So it just dawned on me that there was a significant impact on the banking system. Yeah, and when we think about natural disasters, one of the primary services is banking.
Absolutely.
Right. So you spoke to their infrastructure by way of the telecoms. You spoke about light. You spoke about even movement of cash to service the ABMs. So with that in mind, how are banks now faring given that significant impact that was occasioned by Melissa?
Banks are in a rebuilding mode, Sheena, but they're doing well. Their resilience was tested, and they have been proven their mettle. I believe that the impact, though, is going to take time So remember, banks lend to ordinary Jamaicans and businesses, and those ordinary Jamaicans were significantly impacted by the hurricane. Some persons lost jobs. Some persons were put on, maybe extended leave as they adjusted. Some institutions, tourist sector in particular, those closed down, and
Some are still
so some
closed.
are still closed. Some are opening gradually. So if you think about that, the banking system is a mirror to your real economy,
Okay.
right? So anything that affects your real economy is going to affect your banking system. So what we have observed so far is that non-performing loans, those are loans that are past due 90 days and over, that has gone from 2.5% to 2.8%, right, by December of 2025. What that means, that is $45 billion of loans that were performing before the hurricane that are now past due 90 days or more. So banks are having to absorb that. On top of that, banks have moved rapidly with the guidance from the central bank to try to offer loan moratoria to impacted households and impacted businesses. And so between the time of October, end October, to now, banks have extended $50 billion of loan moratoria to over 2,000 households and businesses across the island. So banks are taking some of that shock away from the real economy. They're absorbing that shock and they continue to lend because lending has slowed down, but lending to households continues to grow and lending to businesses, although it has slowed down, continues to grow. So what that means is banks are trying to, as best as possible, accommodate their customer base because they recognize that persons would have been significantly impacted by the passage of Hurricane Melissa.
With all that has happened, based on what you have shared with us, what are the lessons learned by Bank of Jamaica? I mean, are they contemplating any regulatory or policy frameworks to help the financial sector in terms of business continuity and resilience?
You know, a famous quote says, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So we have certainly gone back to the drawing board and we have picked out maybe 2 or 3 things that I think we can take away from this. One is that we need to provide better guidance to financial institutions in relation to their operational resilience
Right.
and disaster recovery planning. So we're going to be updating those guidelines and consulting with the industry and then monitoring their compliance with that. What we want to ensure is that banks are well placed to come back into service as quickly as possible after a disaster, be it a hurricane or an earthquake or whatever the disaster might be. And so we want to focus on that. We also want to issue guidelines to them in relation to outsourcing activities because increasingly banks are outsourcing a lot of activities to third parties to help them to be more efficient. So they outsource cash handling, they outsource their IT and certain programs that they run. And so we want to make sure that they understand that even though they delegate the activity, they understand that they still are accountable for the outcome. So that's the first takeaway. The second one is that we want to focus on reviewing the credit quality of the loan portfolio of the banking system. It has taken a hard hit coming out of Melissa. And what we want to make sure is that when the auditors come in and when they have to do their financial reporting along the international reporting standards, IFRS 9, etc., that they are not found wanting. And so we want to give them feedback on that, and we'll be focusing on that from now until the end of the year. Thirdly, we want to make sure that we take the main lesson, one of the main lessons from this crisis, and that is that if there's only one means of payment available to a community or a Jamaican, and that is displaced, we want to diversify that and allow an ecosystem where Jamaicans have multiple ways to get access to means of payments. Notice I didn't say cash. access to means of payments. And so we want to embark on a program and continue the program of creating that ecosystem for digital payments. And so we want to continue to push central bank digital currency. We want to continue to roll out the framework that allows for electronic know your customer. There are plans to update the Payments Systems and Settlements Clearing Act that will introduce new players to the space, fintechs and payment service providers who can help to diversify that ecosystem that allows for funds to go from one Jamaican to another Jamaican. And so we'll build that resilience. We can't be a economy that is completely dependent on just one means of payments, that is cash. And so that is the broad framework that we intend to embark on, I would say, over the next weeks, months, and in fact, years.
Thank you very much, Jide. It's always insightful sitting and speaking with you. You need to come back more on Centrally Speaking.
I will.
So you heard it here, viewers. The road to recovery is on and Bank of Jamaica is on the job. We've been speaking with Dr. Jide Lewis, Deputy Governor with responsibility for Financial Institution Supervisory Division at Bank of Jamaica. Stay tuned. More Centrally Speaking after the break. Today's conversation was focused on how Bank of Jamaica is supporting economic recovery efforts post-Hurricane Melissa. Let's recap the conversation. Here are the fast facts. Number 1. After the passage of Hurricane Melissa, 60% of rural ABMs were inoperable, or 250 of the 888 ABMs within Jamaica. 812 ABMs are now available and operational as at January 2026. Number 2. Jamdex, Jamaica's central bank digital currency, or CBDC, is an additional means of accessing cash without having to rely on ABMs. Number 3. The average ABM withdrawal in Jamaica is $15,000, while the average remittance amount received is US $250. Number 4. As a result of Hurricane Melissa, commercial banks' non-performing loans, or NPL, increased from 2.5% to 2.8%. In other words, $48 billion in loans were past due 90 days or more. Number 5. To alleviate displacement after Melissa, BOJ allowed for banks to provide alternate spaces, such as trailer trucks, car parks, and storefronts to operate from. BOJ publishes weekly updates of available ABMs and operational banks by parish and issues guidelines to banks for offering loan moratoria to affected customers. And that's it for our Fast Facts.
I'm sure you learned something today from Dr. Lewis. Man, that's our program for this week.
Follow us on X and Facebook at Central Bank JA, at Central Bank Jamaica on Instagram, and on BOJ's YouTube channel. You can also visit our website at www.boj.org.jm.
And if you have any questions, send them to X or Facebook.
And of course, watch Centrally Speaking next week at the same time right here on your station when we will have another special guest.
I'm Anna.
And I'm Sheena. Thanks for watching. Centrally Speaking is a production of Bank of Jamaica.